Welcome to this week's episode of Coffee with the Journalist, brought to you by OnePitch. The guests on our show include some of the most notable journalists who write about topics ranging from technology to lifestyle and culture, health and science. We discuss the types of stories they cover, their thoughts on exclusives and embargoes, their favorite pitches, and how they connect with sources. Head to onepitch.co and look for the video page to learn more about our new video series featuring journalists from the show. Our guest today on Coffee with the Journalist is Lisa Martine Jenkins from Protocol. Lisa is a senior reporter at Protocol covering climate. During the episode, Lisa breaks down her beat at Protocol, talks about the change in climate news coverage over the last 10 years, her process for reviewing and saving pitches, and more. Let's hear from Lisa now.
Welcome, everyone. This is Coffee with the Journalist. Hopefully you're here because you're a publicist wanting to know how to better work with reporters. That's what we're all about here. My name's Beck Bamberger. With us today is Lisa Martine Jenkins. She's senior, notice the senior, client reporter at Protocol, has a bit of a climate background, which we'll definitely be chatting about. Lisa, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. For those who are not familiar, I like to start out, just for folks who know, how would you describe, in your words, Protocol?
So Protocol, we cover technology and we cover the people and the power and the politics of tech. So it's less the testing of the gadgets and the here's what's new with the iPhone, or although I guess we did today have a new iPhone reveal, but it's more about treating technology as an industry.
And what's going on inside that industry. Definitely important. And specifically climate. So you are, Lisa, probably, I want to say like the 70th reporter, not that we've had on here, but like that I've seen on the interwebs that is now fully dedicated to climate sustainability. I saw someone today that was like, I don't know, I think oil. Someone has a job that's just covering oil. So anyway, it's quite the new and expanding realm. Can you tell us a bit more on what all is encompassing your beat within climate?
Yeah, so my beat is essentially the intersection of climate and technology. So that essentially has two main parts. The first is climate tech and the technologies that will be needed to mitigate climate change. So that's renewables, that's transmission lines, that's EVs, but that's also very, very niche new technologies, things like tracking methane emissions. And then the second part of my job is covering how the tech industry is responding to climate change. So kind of parsing these climate plans that Google and Amazon and Apple puts out, and essentially looking into how this industry, which is increasingly one of the major industries globally, is thinking about how to confront one of the biggest crises that we've faced in human history.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, now this is not usually what I ask on here, but how do you deal with the beat you write about, like emotionally?
I think it requires a certain level of both realism and optimism at the same time. Like, I think if you're too optimistic, you're not going to be able to kind of get to the meat of what's really happening in climate because it's really dark. There's a lot of really, really disappointing news all the time. But I think it would be a pretty impossible job to do if I didn't fundamentally believe that this is something that we can mitigate at the very least.
Yeah.
And it is honestly, looking at where we are now versus where we were a decade ago, pretty hopeful.
How do you think?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely worse in terms of the emissions, and it's definitely worse in terms of the lack of climate action, especially on the international front. But I saw something, and you'll have to fact check me on this, but I saw something that showed kind of what the estimate was in, I think, 2015 for solar development by 2025. And then it showed sort of how that estimate had changed yearly since 2015.
Yeah.
And we're just leaps and bounds beyond where they expected we would be. So
Isn't that great?
we do have the technology. It's just a matter of the political will, and the corporate will to get there.
If you know what though, I will say, I feel that when you have volume and attention, i.e. the media, that adds pressure. So never in this time, ever in September 2022, have there been more reporters dedicated to climate and sustainability. I have to fact check my damn self, but I believe this to be true because there's so many now people, at least national outlets, that are specifically dedicated to this. And it, I think, adds to the immense focus that is upon companies, players, investors, all the people in this space and what they're doing about it. So if that's I think that's a hallmark of a good sign is like, wow, there's no reporters just for this. That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, there are a lot of us. Protocol launched its climate vertical in March. And I think both the AP and the Washington Post significantly expanded their climate teams in the last couple of months. And yeah, it just seems like there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of money being poured towards this beat, which means that, it means that the job is no longer
fringe.
It's no longer fringe. I'm no longer trying to educate people on what greenhouse gas emissions are.
Yes.
It's more like there are people whose entire job is covering climate migration specifically. And that is such an important topic, but would have been maybe a single story a decade ago.
I like where it's going, Lisa. We got that. Let's on a totally different topic, but maybe we'll see. How is your inbox, specifically with pitches?
It's fairly organized, I must say.
Lisa, tell us your tokens of insight, because every journalist should be listening to this now. I should actually start doing that. Have journalists listen to this to hear of other journalists. Go ahead.
Well, it didn't used to be. I think at my very first full-time job, it was kind of chaos because I didn't go in with a plan. And I mean, once you're even 2 weeks in, it's a disaster. And then my second journalism job, I was almost too organized. Like I would have folders for pitches on various topics. And I just spent like half of my life categorizing things. And now I have like a folder for press releases, a folder for pitches, a folder for newsletters that I read in case I need to go back and check up on them, but it doesn't require a huge amount of organization. And some of them I have just sort of, they can automatically be tagged, like the newsletters are kind of automatically tagged as newsletters. And I think I initially had the impulse to just kind of delete pitches that I wasn't interested in, but I had an editor a couple years ago tell me that she intentionally saves her pitches because you never know when 6 months from now you'll be writing about something and you'll remember, oh God, I think I read a pitch about that. And now I can like actually go into my pitch inbox or my pitch folder and look up, I don't know, critical minerals, Southeast Asia. And odds are it'll remind me.
You'll see it. Yeah, you'll see it.
Somebody did email me, and often it's no longer relevant or often they're not the right source, but it does make me feel like I have kind of a Rolodex that just sort of lives in my email.
This is a very common thing. You just let it roll like your own personal Google file. And then you could fact check or double check or pull it back up from the ether of anything you need, even if it was, 17 months ago. So this is a common tool. Lisa, though, I have to applaud you for having a clean and not insane inbox.
Yeah, well,
bravo to you.
Thank you. It's honestly, right now, I was just visiting family for a few weeks, so it's not in fantastic shape right now.
Okay, gotcha.
But I do kind of treat it as a to-do list, like the emails that I need. The things I need to respond to, the things that I know I need to read, like, oh, this was a newsletter that's really relevant to me, but I didn't have time to read it this morning, but I'm going to read it before I I don't know, while I'm on the train going home. And then once I'm done, like once I have responded, I will move the emails away. So I really strive for inbox zero. I don't know that I've actually been there in several months, but
that's okay.
I do get very stressed out at the thought of too many entirely unaddressed emails. Like even if I'm not actually responding, I am at least reading virtually everything.
Oh, wow. I tell you, there's such a dichotomy between journalists, and I say between because like one or the other, one being the as close to the zero as possible in the inbox, or the let it ride 500,972 unread emails. Like, don't give a shit. It's good. Just keep it right. It's so interesting. I wonder what like left brain, right brain persona that is or something, or maybe it's an outlet thing. I don't know. Maybe if you're, who knows? Anyway, you were mentioning, Lisa, that you have some pitches, something that you like and something that you didn't like. Why don't you share?
Yeah. So one that I think was kind of counterintuitively good.
Yes.
Was from probably like 4 or 5 months ago. That was extremely straightforward. The pitch is, or the subject line is, 30 years of climate research funding has overlooked the potential of experimental transformative technologies, new study warns, which is quite long. Like it's not pithy, but it was kind of a niche enough topic, and also general enough that I thought it could actually be relevant to Protocol's readers. So the entire thing is on climate technology and the funding for research into climate technology. And the pitch itself is 4 sentences.
Yes.
Saying, I hope you would be interested in a new University of Sussex Business School research, and outlines just very, very simply what the research says. And then below the fold, they had more detail and a link to the full study. And I think it was very targeted to me. Like I think I do get a lot of pitches about academic research that is on grassland development, and that are just it's just not what I cover.
Yeah,
like as interesting
grassland development, like what? Growing grass?
Agriculture.
Okay, so ag. Okay.
Yeah, which
wow,
I do personally find interesting, but it's just not what Protocol covers. And I do think, I mean, there are so many publications and there are so many people with climate in their title that, and I'm sure some of them really do cover developments in agriculture, but I'm not one of them. But this felt like they know what I cover. It's not a high profile enough study that I feel like it's already going to have been written about. It's all that many outlets will have already written about it. And it was like pretty straightforward. I wrote a very short piece. It got pretty good response. It definitely didn't reinvent the wheel, but it did provide some very interesting context for the kinds of things that I do cover more generally. And I mean, even though the subject line was long, it also is essentially the title of a press release. It's the title of a story. And I mean, as a person who actually reads all my emails, I read the subject line and said, "Oh, that actually seems relevant." And let's see, the second pitch I brought, the subject line is "idea for you."
That doesn't entice me. I'd be like, nope, ideas. I don't like ideas. But okay, you opened it, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, I open all my emails. And I think what was slightly frustrating about it is it kind of, the first like 5 sentences of the email are framing it as, I'm a reader. This is something that I care about. I have an idea that could be a good fit for Protocol. These are things we're starting to wonder about. Like it felt very like this person was almost trying to frame it as, oh, I just happened to think of this thing that could be a good topic for you. Almost the way that like my dad does Like, oh, hey, I read this thing. It might be relevant to you. And then it gets into, I work with this company, and the company is not particularly relevant to what protocol does. And it just was far too long. And I think that the real failure of the pitch is they followed up, I think, 3 or 4 times. Which always drives me kind of crazy, especially as somebody who is reading everything. Like sometimes it takes a while, but like I do really try to respond when something is relevant to me. And so I think, maybe one follow-up if you think it may have really gotten buried, but I think any more than one follow-up is, I don't know, just not
it's too much
respectful.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Great examples. Thank you for bringing them live. This is so helpful. Oh my gosh.
Today's interview will continue after this brief message brought to you by OnePitch. Are you curious to see the unique ways OnePitch helps PR professionals and marketers pitch journalists? Head to onepitch.co to learn about our new OnePitch score and see how easy it is to find the right journalist to pitch your news to. Sign up for your free account today. Now, back to today's episode.
Okay. Now, clearly, we didn't like the idea for you, a subject line. Do you have any best subject lines or what a best subject line has?
I think a name is good if they are pitching an interview with a person. I must say I rarely respond to those unless it's somebody who is really, I don't know, big in either tech or in the climate world. But I think highlighting who the person is, like one that I responded to, and I can't remember the subject line precisely, but I interviewed Tony Fadell, who is the inventor of the iPod and also Nest thermostats. And he has now been working kind of in the climate sphere. And so I think that pitch said something like interview with iPod inventor Tony Fadell. And I said, actually, that might actually be quite relevant to our readers.
Yeah.
I think a name is a really good way of jogging the interest very quickly. Because I can, if I know who the person is, I will be able to tell if they are relevant. But I would say often they're not, and that's just not the fault of it's not the fault of the PR person. It's just kind of the nature of
that's how it is.
Yeah, the nature of the beast. And I think the other thing
Okay.
is perhaps when someone is able to reference an overall trend that is not just happening today. I've gotten a lot of pitches in the last day or two about California's grid in light of the heat wave, which is relevant, is something that I'm following, but I'm just not going to be able to turn on a dime and call up somebody or write a story on something that is happening today because there are other things on my plate today. But when I get a pitch that's something more like, I don't know, the supply chains for critical minerals are tangled, here's some research or here's a person who has a unique take on it. I think odds are better that I will at least have some use for that at some point. That is a topic that I am following on a week to week, month to month basis. It's not just kind of a flash in the pan. Obviously, the resilience of California's grid is also not a flash in the pan.
Yes.
But I'm not going to be writing about it today.
Yeah, it's not hot all the time. Yeah, I got you. Okay, that is good. Let Lisa us play a little fill in the blank section here. So I have my phrase and then you could fill it in from there. Does that sound good?
Yes, sure.
Okay. My favorite sources always.
Respect boundaries.
Okay, elaborate. Don't follow up within 4 hours?
Well, yes, don't follow up within 4 hours. And I think are kind of the right amount of in touch. I think there is this idea that if you have a close relationship with a journalist, you need to be in touch all the time. And the people who I actually reach out to when I am looking for a source and think they might be useful, we really only maybe talk every like 2 or 3 months, but like I know their name because they have been helpful in the past and we have an actual relationship. But they're not, and they do pitch me independently sometimes, but if I don't respond or it takes me a while to respond, it doesn't feel like that necessitates a follow-up on their end. Like I think that it seems like they feel confident in our relationship and in the boundaries that we have both established.
Good boundaries. Okay. You'll never get a response from me if
your pitch is not on my beat.
Yeah. Well, do you get pitches for like new product launch for a swimwear brand? Does that happen?
It's hilarious that is your example, because the example that I give in this case is I remember very vividly getting a pitch when I was covering like energy and climate more generally on a biodegradable bikini company that.
See, now I have problems with that right off the bat, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have questions, but I did not respond because it was just not even slightly relevant to my beat.
No. Good God. Okay. It's funny how like I come up with these ridiculous examples and you're like, oh, hold up. We got that. Okay. You can follow up with me speaking of boundaries.
If there's actual time pressure, like if there's an embargoed study that you think is actually relevant, or if there's an exclusive that you need my answer on, and otherwise you'll pass it to somebody else.
There you go.
Yeah, okay. I guess if there's real time pressure that doesn't feel manufactured.
The appropriate amount of lead time for a story is?
I think if it's like embargoed research or something, or an embargoed press release, ideally a week or two, just because it will enable me to fit that story around the other things that I'm working on. For something that's like would be more of a feature, which frankly I pretty rarely get feature ideas from pitches, but it has happened. Like those tend to be more like months in advance. Like I think the timing
months in advance. Oh, good to know.
I mean,
it takes months.
It takes a while to report out a feature, and it also takes a while to pitch it to the editors and to gather other sources and get a sense of whether it's something that you would actually want to write about. And I think if the pitch is, hey, I have this great idea for a feature, this huge thing is happening next week, that's just never actually going to be possible to turn around.
My favorite stories to write are?
I think involve characters.
Characters. Okay.
Like humans, to be clear. Like
humans, yes. Yeah. No, we don't need bears in the woods. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think a lot of climate reporting, and I have a background in covering chemical regulation. Like I definitely, I have done a lot of kind of science-focused reporting in my career, but it's always a really nice treat when you get to interview people who are really interesting and have a real story beyond, I'm a CEO of a company that is relevant to your work.
Yes. Okay. Ooh, thanks for playing our fill in the blank, Lisa. That was good. Okay. Now, for relationship building with you, how would people go about that?
I think generally it happens if it happens. Like I think there are people with whom I have really good relationships and I can't even quite remember how they first reached out or kind of what the context was.
Oh, okay.
But I do think offering to kind of hop on the phone for 5 to 10 minutes has tended to be one of my preferred methods of kind of getting to know someone who's in the comms world, because those are conversations that typically involve them saying, what are you interested in? What kind of companies would you be interested in hearing developments about? And then they actually become more useful sources to me. I think a quick kind of intro, especially if you represent some kind of major tech company, is often useful, because that also makes my life easier when I am reporting on like the Teslas or the Apples or the Amazons of the world. Like if I know if I know somebody who has worked with
Mm-hmm.
that company and we
Mm-hmm.
have our own relationship, like that means I don't have to get stuck in the slog of the press at inserttechcompanyhere.com inbox. So I think like there's definitely benefit to reaching out, but I think it also really just depends on my bandwidth at any given moment. Like there are weeks where I
Yes.
where
Like, I
I
cannot talk
do
to
those
anybody.
calls and and then there are also weeks where for no reason other than simply my plate is too full. Like perhaps the pitch is wonderful, perhaps the person seems really relevant to my work, but I just like the connection never happens.
So kind of it's like timing for you, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Like depends on just like, do you have time to chat or we just don't have that? That's okay. That's just
Yeah.
what
And I mean,
happens. Yeah.
I do really try to like, I mean, this is the whole like inbox as to-do list
Yes.
concept again. I do really try to flag emails that I want to respond to and flag pitches that even if they're maybe not right for this week, like are maybe relevant down the line. And I would hope that I'm fairly responsive in that respect. But I do think so much of the relationship between people in comms and journalists is based on timing and luck. And there have been times where
That's just true. Yes.
where people have pitched me and I've said, oh my goodness, I'm literally writing a story on that topic and was about to research sources. And this person is exactly who I want to talk to. That's happened maybe twice, but it feels really exciting when it does.
But imagine it on the other side, like for the publicist, it's like, oh my God, lightning strike. Like It's just one of those moments. So that's good. Okay, Lisa, what are you reading, listening to, watching? We'll take Netflix series. We'll take anything. What you got?
I read a lot of fiction. I studied English literature and
lit major.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of us in journalism. And yeah, I do love reading nonfiction, but I find that fiction feels like more of a relief. I'm reading a book called Either Or, which is the sequel to The Idiot by Elif Batuman, which is one of my favorite books the last couple of years. It's like kind of a loose, I mean, it's sort of a veiled autobiography of a girl at Harvard, and she goes to Hungary, and it's hard to describe, but it's extremely, extremely beautifully written. And so I'm excited to be reading the sequel. And I'm also reading The Overstory, which is really, really wonderful.
Overstory. Oh, who's it by? Well, I'll look it up. Overstory. Okay. Oh, Richard Powers?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Overstory by Richard Powers. It's essentially the story of trees. Like it's like a bunch of connected stories about kind of the human relationship with trees and with nature. And
how beautiful.
I would really recommend it.
Now people love it. There's 19,000 reviews on Amazon. Oh my God.
Yeah.
People love this book. Wow.
It's very inspiring, I think, as a climate writer. It's not exactly the kind of writing that I do, but it is kind of the perfect combination of the literary and the environmental.
And Pulitzer Prize win and #1 New York Times bestseller. Adding right now. Look at that.
Yeah, highly recommend.
It won in 2019 for the Pulitzer Prize in Fiction. Wow. Listen to this headline. A monumental novel about reimagining our place in the living world. This is why I do this show, Lisa. This is just to hear the best stories ever.
Yeah, you're here for the recommendations.
I really am. I mean, all the other chat too, but my God, yes. Oh, wait, do I already have it in my, wait. Oh, okay. I got to look at, okay. I'm going to look it back up and see did I already get this? It's looking like I did. Anyway, that is great. Oh, what a great recommendation, Lisa. Okay. On a rather different topic, but obviously related, what do you think the future of journalism is?
That's a great question. I obviously have no idea. However, I think the trends that have sort of held throughout my career, which has been this sort of move away from the dailies and move away from local news, which I think has been really kind of detrimental to the the journalism landscape. Like, I don't necessarily see that reversing anytime soon, sadly. Like, I think it's just really difficult to monetize news. And I think that's something that every single publication that launches is grappling with.
Yeah, seriously.
But
Yeah.
I'm sincerely hopeful that we'll figure it out. And one thing that I heard someone just who is not a journalist, someone who I know personally, somebody said like, oh, I wish I could just pay $1 for an article. Like, I wish I could just, like, I don't necessarily want to subscribe to this magazine, but like occasionally there's something that's really, really relevant to me. And I kind of just don't read it because of a paywall. But I definitely would pay $1 or $2 for the article. I just wouldn't, I wouldn't necessarily set up a subscription just because I want to read an article in a publication I don't typically come across. And the thing that they were saying was, we've made it so easy to just buy things via Instagram. Like, I have bought a random pair of sunglasses that were advertised via Instagram, and I just sort of double clicked the side button on my iPhone, and then they arrived at my house five days later. And they were saying, like, I don't understand why news hasn't figured out a way to do that, to just kind of give people these bite-sized like tastes of the news. And I don't necessarily know that that's the solution, but I've been thinking about it kind of ever since, that we're still relying on the subscription model that, has existed since before there was the internet. But the news has become such a diffuse thing, and so many people read so many different publications. And it is kind of a tall order to expect readers to subscribe to all of them. So I don't know. I'm hoping that we figure it out sooner than later. And I think we do have a lot of really novel ideas for convincing people to pay for stuff. And it would be good if media got on board.
You bring up a good point, which is, God, things are bought so easily for whatever random stuff you buy on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And yet, why is that not as easy on the journalist front? And to your point, it's very hard to say to a consumer, hey, do you want to spend $137 a month with all these subscriptions of your favorite 10 outlets? Like, no, you're not going to do that. Most likely. Yes, if you're a PR shop, sure. But I'm very curious to see what shakes out.
Yeah, me too.
Yes. We don't have the solution, basically, per this podcast right now, but
that would be good if we did.
It'd be great. But that's not what we solve here, Lisa. But thank you for being on for today. What we do solve is how to pitch journalists better and how to keep Lisa's inbox super clean. Lisa, you should maybe give a talk on this for like all your journalist friends who've been on this. They need help. They need help out there. So
thank you so much.
Thank you just for being on. Thanks for hanging out with us. Super fun.
Such a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Coffee with the Journalist featuring Lisa Martine Jenkins from Protocol. To learn more about the latest tools on OnePitch and to subscribe to our weekly podcast newsletter, head to our website at onepitch.co. We'll see you all next week with even more insights about the journalists you want to learn more about. Until then, start great stories.